Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today I am going to unearth an old pulp adventure that has been lost to the annals of RPG history, Black Diamond. Now, as the RPG hobby enters its 5th decade, I've found myself doing archaeology on a lot of old adventures and supplements. And like real archaeology, sometimes you find gold, but a lot of the time you find broken shards, material that was good at the time but doesn't really work anymore. That's not because the early authors of RPG books and adventures were bad. It's just the hobby was young and forming, and so modern ideas about quality and polish and pacing hadn't quite taken hold yet. In fact, when I'm short on my own ideas, however, I often look at some of these old adventures and reboot them, like taking the core idea and twisting it around and modernizing it. I've done this to a few adventures, ranging from some like really early D&D ones to top secret ones to an old FASA Star Trek adventure. You can download a lot of these for free on my blog. The link's in the description below. While many of these old adventures are still available to buy on sites like DriveThruRPG, there's a ton of material that's just been lost to time. And one of those adventures that's been lost to time is Black Diamond, a pulp adventure included in the very first edition of GURPS Cliffhangers, but not the second edition. And so, like the Ark of the Covenant, is now secreted away, unable to be accessed by anyone. But fortunately, I have my trusty print copy today and I can talk about it. Now, as many of you viewers know, I'm a huge fan of pulp adventures. It's one of my favorite genres because it's so easy for players to understand. The adventures are fast-paced and full of just raw adventure and excitement. And GURPS Cliffhangers is a fantastic supplement in both this first edition and the second edition, which you can still get. The supplement just details the world of the 1930s, the serial movies that inspired the genre, the exotic locations, the character archetypes, and so much more. And even if you don't play GURPS and you're a fan of pulp, you should find a copy of this because it's such a great source book on the genre, and it actually features like very few actual game mechanics. So anyway, as I was saying, this first edition of GURPS Cliffhangers, printed way back when in 1989, included a pulp adventure, Black Diamond. By the way, I just want to take a moment and say I loved it when GURPS sourcebooks included an adventure at the back because it made it so much easier for GMs like me to try out a new genre for their friends without asking me to do a ton of work in advance, especially if that genre was like a weird one that was just hard to grapple with or hard to steal adventures from other systems. I mean, why didn't sourcebooks like GURPS Aztecs, Age of Napoleon, or Cthulhu Punk include adventures? That's crazy. Help a GM out. And this extreme annoyance, by the way, is actually what caused me to start my adventures blog, where you can download a lot of free adventures for crazy genres. So I guess that's a good thing. But back to Black Diamond. This adventure pits a brave group of pulp heroes against gangsters, mad scientists, and thieves on the hunt for the origins of the mysterious, maybe supernatural Black Diamond. The adventure was intended to be the start of a whole series of adventures. It was even called Black Diamond Prologue in the book, and promised a follow-up adventure called Black Diamond Amazon Adventure, which, like the greatest of cliffhangers, was never released. And as much as I've tried researching this, I just can't even figure out if the sequel was ever even written. So, 30 years later, is Black Diamond worth your time, or does it belong in a museum? Well, grab your fedora and hang on to your potatoes, because not only am I going to give you a full review of Black Diamond, but I'm also going to give you GM some tips and tricks on how to run this one great. Black Diamond was written by Brian J. Underhill, who also wrote GURPS Cliffhangers. It's a very short adventure, clocking in at just 10 pages, which means it can easily be run in just one session. It's a fairly linear adventure that jumps between 4 acts, but each act gives the PCs a decent amount of agency. The adventure begins at the NYU Science Fair, where the theme is the new age of technology. The PCs are all visitors to the fair, and so they can be virtually any kind of character. Like you could have a cop, an inventor, a journalist, just all adventuring together, which I really like. It's pretty wide open. But after a little bit of time seeing the wondrous exhibits in the science fair, the sound of gunfire interrupts the whole affair. Several gunmen have entered the fair, and the PCs now have to leap into action. I'd like that this adventure starts with immediate action, although the GM should do a little thinking about how to make this like an interesting set piece. Like I always set it at a big museum, like the Museum of Natural History in New York, so I can complicate the action with things like collapsing dinosaur skeletons, clueless tourists, and maybe even a weird exhibit or two, like a small experimental gyrocopter that will just go crazy and tear up the place if it's hit by a stray bullet. Once the smoke clears, the PCs discover that one of the artifacts exhibited at the museum has been stolen, the Black Diamond, a rare stone imbued with geoelectrical power, which when it's hit with either physical or another type of energy force, it shoots out a beam of like dark energy. Now, no one really knows much about this diamond, but it's now gone. And the original discoverer of this diamond, an anthropology professor named Davis Cooper, is highly concerned, and he hires the PCs to recover the stone as fast as possible. His daughter, Pamela, insists that she accompany the PCs. Now, frustratingly, Pamela actually doesn't have much to do in this adventure at all, and the adventure tantalizingly promises that she's key to a future adventure in the Black Diamond series. So it's a little weird that she's this like useless tag-along, but I'll talk about ways you can use her later on in this video. Searching the museum, the PCs find a matchbook advertising the Blue Room, a sleazy club in Harlem that's often attended by foreigners. Yeah, that doesn't sound so great, and it doesn't even sound what kind of foreigners these people are. I encourage GMs to make it a kind of dining club for ambitious hooligans who are very eager to climb up in the New York underworld. And so this is kind of like a dangerous spot that a lot of the PCs might know about. Well, once they arrive, after some role-playing and asking around, the PCs will be introduced to Janus Vito, a sort of kingpin, who claims that he knows something about the Black Diamond and is willing to help. He's like a muckety-muck in this club, and he invites the PCs to a private meeting in a room in the basement of the club. Once downstairs, Vito reveals his grand plan. And, well, the adventure just really isn't that crisp about what that plan is. It was probably planned for a future adventure. But it does hint that it definitely involves a mysterious doctor who maybe lives in the Balkans and is creating an experimental death ray by using the Black Diamonds. But because this all isn't like very spelled out clearly in the adventure, I just involve the Nazis. I set the adventure in 1935 and I say Vito is on the payroll of one of Hitler's commanders. And Vito's planning on handing over the first experimental death ray to Nazi spies later that night in one of the secret warehouses. And all that death ray was missing was a Black Diamond, which he arranged to steal, and now that meeting will take place later on. With that, Vito orders his thugs to attack the PCs and he escapes. Now, while the adventure does allow for Vito not to escape, I really don't like it when adventures like really want the villain to escape, but don't give GMs a lot of tools to help do this in a natural way. I mean, Vito's sitting in a chair, like giving an evil soliloquy, and then his thugs rush in. Well, he's just one turn away from being like headshotted by a bold investigator. And remember, this is GURPS, which is very realistic when it comes to guns, so the likelihood that Vito is going to go down in like a spray of fire in the first turn is probably pretty high. But pulp villains often do escape. It is part of the genre, especially right after a soliloquy. So rig that room up with traps. What I oftentimes do is I say there's a steel door that after Vito gives his speech, it slams down, separating his desk from the rest of the room, and then sleeping gas pours into the room as his thugs enter.
You're cornered, Vito. You're going to tell us where that Black Diamond is now.
This approach gives the PCs a shot at fighting their way out, or they could be captured by those thugs, in which case they end up in a perilous situation an hour or two later, like about to be dumped off the Brooklyn Bridge with concrete boots on. Either way, these changes kind of make this fight a bit more epic, and even if the PCs lose, they now have a heck of an escape to now pull off. By the way, I do like how the adventure also mentions that once the PCs start hunting for the Blue Room, they're going to be tailed by some government officials from the War Department. This is nice because if the PCs ever get over their heads, well, they can get some help from these guys. With Vito escaped, the PCs have to find this secret warehouse before this meeting takes place. The adventure kind of leaves it out in the open, like an up to the GM on how to figure out the location of the hidden warehouse. So I always just include a handout that the PCs can find in Vito's office, which has its location. Or the PCs can just interrogate one of the guards that they beat up. Although, if you want to expand the adventure into a full-on investigation, this is a good place you could do it and add your own material. Oh, and if you like the classic damsel in distress plots, at this point while they're looking for the hidden warehouse, you could have Pamela decide to go off and research something that's important, and then she could kind of get kidnapped off camera and turn up at the next scene in the warehouse, which will add a little more texture into that final fight. Either way, the PCs will end up at Vito's secret warehouse later that night. Now, sometimes my PCs come up with the plan to just call the cops and let them raid the whole place, but that takes away some of the fun. But in the 1930s, you can easily say that this is really hard because the local cops are corrupt and they've been paid off by Vito and they move really slow. Can't hit the warehouse until the next day when the Black Diamond is long gone. And here at the warehouse, you have another big brawl, this time with Vito and his goons. But this time, the PCs have to contend with a gunner wielding this experimental death ray, firing down at them from the catwalks in the warehouse. Death ray! This is a really fun fight, but I always try to create some fun goon lieutenants here to make it feel different from some of the other battles with gun-wielding thugs. The adventure even includes a guy named Thalco. Thalco, I love that name. It was this big beefy guy who hates guns and loves his fists. And I would just use him, but be really careful because otherwise he'll just get gunned down right away. So I always hide Thalco near the catwalks. And just when the PCs get up there to stop the death ray gunner, Thalco steps out and disarms the PC and challenges him to a mano-a-mano fist fight. This always works really good, and the rest of the players kind of root for that brawl as it's taking place on the catwalks. It's very Pulp if you can pull that off. Just as the PCs have won the battle and they get to that death ray, it explodes, either from misfiring or falling from the catwalk or with a self-destruction switch. To make this feel a little bit more natural, I like to say that the gunner is wearing a bunch of German stick grenades. And so when the PCs take him out with a lucky shot, it feels better that the whole thing just explodes, and then to make the catwalk come down with it and make the PCs make rolls to stay on their feet. I like that a little better than just arbitrarily saying the thing explodes and the Black Diamond's melted. With the Black Diamond destroyed with the death ray, the PCs have nothing to do but to high-five each other and head back to Professor Cooper's house. There he finally admits the origin of the Black Diamond and that he was in the Amazon where he found a lost tribe, and his expedition was mostly wiped out, and he ended up wrestling the leader of this tribe, and somehow he ripped off the chief's thong, which had the Black Diamond on it. It's all pretty weird, but okay. And before Cooper escaped with the diamond, he saw in the distance a massive Black Diamond, the size of two fists there, and now he needs the PCs to head to the Amazon and find it before the mysterious doctor does, and the Nazis, which I added. But in true cliffhanging fashion, just as the PCs hear the end of this story, the windows are shattered by machine gun fire, and a Molotov cocktail lands right at their feet inside the house. And just as everything catches on fire, the adventure is suddenly over. And that's Black Diamond, Prologue, or Black Diamond Intrigue in New York, as it's sometimes called in its own adventure. So what did I think? Like, ultimately, I think this is a pretty tight adventure, still mostly stands up. I look for a few different qualities in a great pulp adventure. First, strong villains. And I think that Vito, plus this mysterious doctor that's just off camera, and Thalco. I love Thalco. Thalco. Like, they're really fun ones. I also look for great set pieces, which the scenes in Black Diamond mostly do. Though, like I suggested, you probably want to make a few tweaks here and there to them just to add some villain variety, some traps, and some obstacles and like sub-objectives just to make the action scenes feel a little bit more interesting. Finally, I look for exotic locales, which unfortunately this adventure doesn't really have. It's all set in New York, but I'll give it a passing grade here because it does feature some very different locations within New York, like a museum, this underworld gangster hideout, and warehouses. And obviously it was planning to do something more exotic with whatever Black Diamond Amazon adventure was supposed to be. I also like that this adventure is really easy to run. It's well written, it's clear, it fits in a short session, it works really well for new players. It's well illustrated and includes detailed maps of the key locations. In fact, I just think it does exactly what it was supposed to do, which is to kick off a pulp campaign. And even though the follow-up adventure was never published, the MacGuffin of a Black Diamond and an evil doctor are fairly easy to riff on if you're an experienced GM. Or you should just go download The Phantom Jungle, one of my adventures that I've written. You can get it off my site, which will work fairly well as a follow-up to this one if you just somehow add the Black Diamond as a MacGuffin into it. Unfortunately, Black Diamond is going to be really hard to find because it's not available digitally. That's unfortunate, and I really hope that Steve Jackson Games makes it available in some form at some time in the future. With some adjustments, it's a really good starter adventure for anyone who wants to run a pulp game. But even if you can't find it this way, hopefully this video gives you some inspiration for your own rebooted version of the events in this adventure. Oh, and if you do have a copy, you can download my handouts and tokens for this adventure on my blog, and the link's in the description below. If you enjoyed this video and want to see me uncover more long-lost RPG treasures, go ahead and smash those like and subscribe buttons like you would a Nazi's jaw. And if you remember this adventure or ever played in it or GM'd it, I'd love to know what your experience was like. Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, I'm JC. And just remember, when in doubt, add Nazis. Oh, what if Thalco was a Nazi? Oh, I'm doing that next time.